Interview and job search strategies that work. I'm here with Gary Rada again. Hey, Gary, how you doing today?
I'm good, Gary. How about yourself?
I'm fantastic. Happy Friday to you. Happy Friday to you. Um,
Likewise.
I want to ask you, right? So, um, this is something actually that I've been thinking about, but for I know a lot of people have been thinking about this, and there's a thing called a side hustle. There, people talk about getting a side hustle, having your own business, and I get that. That's awesome. However, there's people out there like myself, in some regard anyway, who just want to do a 9 to 5, and they want to do another 9 to 5 or a part-time gig. Say, for instance, um, a systems administrator, but they don't want to work at Home Depot, and they're like they'd rather be in the IT field, and they just want to do a part-time gig, say 20, 30 hours a week, because it's a higher pay. Say now they make $30 an hour, and they want to make something, say, like $20 an hour. And
Sure.
could you talk about that, like the type of a recruiting aspect, or in jobs in general that you see from your end?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a great question, and it's something that I ran into a lot over the years, which was ah boy, like as a recruiter, I would let's say I'll use you as an example. Let's say I would call you and say, "Hey, Gary, I have this this full time contract opportunity," and you might respond and say something of the sorts of, I'm currently engaged on a project right now. I don't actually have really the bandwidth or the time to take on something else, and I don't want to leave the job that I have right now. But if you've got something that's like part time or 20 hours a week, 10 hours a week kind of thing, like I'd love to pick something like that up. And I'll tell you that I'll give you, I guess, a little bit of insight into how I always receive that information, or would often receive that information, would be like, I don't want to hear that, right? Like, and for me, the reason that I would say that, and I'll qualify where I'm going with that, but because for me, it wasn't very common that a client would call and say, "Hey, I've got this 10-hour a week gig, or I need this type of person, and I could really only promise this kind of hours." Where I'd be able to pick that phone back up and say, "Hey, Gary, great news! I happen to have this customer who has this 10-hour a week need. Now you've got your side gig or your side hustle." So for me, it wasn't that frequent that I'd have an opportunity like that. But from personal experience, as well as in the recruiting space, I do have some insights to share on how that usually goes, what it really looks like, and more importantly, I think some what I hope is good advice for folks that are starting to think of opportunities in that area, and really kind of some things that they should be keeping in mind, and maybe some realities to think about as well. So, first things first. So, okay, I want a side hustle. What do I need to do? Well, traditionally speaking, if you're going to step away from something that's core, that's your key expertise, something that where really you're a subject matter expert in that space, and you now want to do something different, right? A little left of center. I think first thing to keep in mind, especially like before you pick up a phone and talk to a recruiter, or you're already on the phone with one and talking to one about a different gig, is keep in mind that what you might be looking to do on the side might not be something where you are as much of an expert in, or perhaps even an expert at all, as compared to what your core competency would be. So keep in mind of who you're talking to. A great example of that would be, if you're talking to somebody like I was, who focused solely on the senior level space, and you're looking for an opportunity that might be more in that entry level or mid level space, maybe keep in mind that that person might not be actually the best source of job opportunities for you. And so meter your expectations as far as, how viable of a resource that person could be for you. Does that make sense, Gary? To
Oh,
start with, does that make sense?
yeah, yeah, I know what you're saying. Right. You're, I get it what you're saying. You're a leader, you're a PM, let's say, right? And you go into another field, or the recruiter, they don't have those low level jobs, if you will. And I fully understand what you're saying. They don't have the recruiter doesn't have the reach, or he or she doesn't know. Yeah, I completely.
Yep. All Perfect. So we're on the same page with that. So what I usually advise people to do, and I would do the same in this scenario, is if you had, and I'm going to start kind of with a comparison here, which is, um, if you've got a car and you've got a motorcycle, and your motorcycle needs service, are you going to drive your motorcycle to the Ford dealership and ask the service technician what's wrong with your motorcycle and how can they fix it? Well, no, right? Because they don't specialize in motorcycles. And while you could potentially get absolutely lucky and that particular technician happens to be a motorcycle rider themselves and says, well, maybe I can help you after hours. No, you're going to take a motorcycle to a motorcycle dealership. You're going to take a car to a car dealership or to a service center that specializes in that. So I'm taking the long road of saying, if you're working with a senior level recruiter for senior level positions and you're looking for a side hustle, find yourself, get an introduction to, or simply put yourself out there online on the number of different job posting opportunities, Indeed's, Career, Monster, Dice, etc., and look for that entry level recruiter, somebody who's going to have a high volume of entry to mid level positions in the field that you're looking to break into, and have that person in your virtual Rolodex as a source of opportunities for those lower level positions. So now you've got someone who specializes in helping you find positions in that core competency in which you're an expert. And now you also have someone in your back pocket who is out there actively searching for, or at least someone you can call for those opportunities when you have the time. Does that make sense?
Oh, exactly. I know what you're talking. Yeah, it makes perfect sense. I know what you're talking about. I just thought of a strategy to actually get into that niche or whatever, but I'll let you
Yeah.
finish your thought.
Yeah, no, and absolutely. And so it's aligning the things that you want with what's available to you, that, or the people that can help make that side hustle a reality. And really there's nothing better, especially if you're in technology. There's nothing better than utilizing the tools that already exist out there to put yourself out there. So don't be afraid of the online job postings, just, or resume posting places, but just be aware that, like anything else, of course, you're going to have to learn how to wade through the garbage. You're going to have to learn how to communicate with people that they may not necessarily have your best interest in mind. They may not communicate very well with you, whether it's simply a language barrier or a lack of understanding of what it is that you do. So there's a certain level, especially with the junior to mid-level, probably more so on the entry level, junior level space, that you're probably going to be working frequently with people who have about as much experience in what you're looking to do as what they do. You're probably going to be talking with recruiters who maybe have 6 months or a year, maybe 2 years if you're lucky in the business of being a recruiter, comparable to the 6 months, maybe to 2 years of experience that you might have in what you're looking to do as a side hustle. So whereas you're not an expert in that particular skill, they're probably not yet an expert in their field as well. So I think that's also important to keep in mind. And hopefully that helps you sort of meter your expectations, which is why it's great to have numerous different vehicles, numerous different channels of opportunities at your disposal, so that you kind of know which ones are your better producers, which ones aren't, and you can sort of meter your efforts and your contributions to those relationships accordingly.
Okay. Yeah, makes perfect sense, actually. Huh. Interesting. So, I wanted to just express my thought when while you said that, and it was this. This is interesting, and it was nothing more than me thinking, well, if I want a side hustle, maybe that resume that I have is top heavy. Like, for instance, taking out my address and just putting my email, my phone number. That way they
Yep.
don't assume I'm in a location. And then maybe I just need to, senior whatever, just make it look like I'm, even though I have those other skills, but make it look like I'm only looking for a help desk. Because maybe they won't, they'll see, oh, well, this person, for instance, me, I'm a, senior whatever, right, systems administrator. maybe they'll think, oh, he's not or he won't want this job, but they don't know that I really want that help desk. So maybe that's the strategy to use, is just to put in a help desk job. I'm looking for this, and then get rid of all that other, top heavy stuff. Then when I'm in the interview, then I can just talk about the other stuff and then explain, oh, here's why I want this job. Maybe that's the entry to the gatekeeper. Your thoughts?
Wow. So that's so there's a lot to unpack there. So I love what you just said. And, although maybe not necessarily for the reasons you might think. So, I absolutely understand where you're coming from on your thought, because, let me ask you this. Have you ever heard the feedback from a hiring manager or a recruiter or somebody else, that old tried and true, overqualified?
I have. Yeah, I've heard that.
Okay. And you've probably never once in your life been frustrated when you've heard that, right? Never. So that speaks to your point of what you're saying of, okay, maybe if I'm a seasoned professional in my space and I submit my seasoned professional resume to this position that clearly doesn't need a seasoned professional, am I immediately putting myself behind the eight ball of getting consideration for that fact? Is that more or less what you're asking?
More or less, yeah.
Okay. So, and I talked about this in a previous podcast, but so I'm a huge fan of transparency. And so to the latter part of your statement before I got engaged here was, do I want to tailor my resume? Do I want to remove some things on there that might scare them off, discredit me as, or perhaps not discredit, but overstate my experience for the position or job that I'd like to pick up on the side, and kind of reduce my chances of maybe getting a phone call or an interview, et cetera. And what I would encourage people to do is, I'm a big fan, and really good technology companies or companies who need good technology folks, I'm a big fan of continuous education, right? And I think some of the best people in the technology field are the ones that are constantly picking up new skills related to, or at least tangentially related to, the field of which you are an expert. And so since I'm a big fan of continued education for my own self, most people in this space are going to appreciate someone also who's saying, hey, listen, I have a particular set of skills, but I'm looking to expand that, because I think that if I have a better understanding of all the moving parts within an organization's IT infrastructure, that'll ultimately one day perhaps even make me better at what it is that I'm an expert in, as well as just better enhance my understanding of all the moving parts as a whole and make me a better asset, not just in the side hustle, but also in my core, in what I do for a living. And so I would actually encourage folks to not remove things from a resume, especially say someone, Gary, in your particular position. If you removed everything that overqualified you, they'd want to know have you been working since 1979, right? And I'm making up a year, but you get what I'm saying. Is yes. You'd have to delete an awful lot of things that give you any credibility in any space whatsoever, just to not look overqualified. And I think you're not alone there. And so I would just be upfront. I would change the summary or the mission statement on my resume. Seasoned IT, systems analyst, systems architect, systems engineer with over 25 years of experience, currently seeking part-time or limited hour opportunities in the areas of help desk, in troubleshooting, et cetera, whatever, in code development, in programming, whatever that might be. I would just be honest, because I think if you are, then when you do actually get those calls and you do actually get those opportunities, I think that you and the employer starting on the same level ground of understanding, I think that's going to make ultimately the work that you do get better for them, better for you, and a more rewarding experience. Plus, I can't tell you how many times I put people to work over that 9 years where they came in to do one specific task or to focus on one specific thing, But because they had 6 months or a year or so of experience in something else, that particular customer happened to also leverage that experience in a different direction, even just for 2 hours over the life of a project. And so that person got to, needle on something else for a little bit, and it works in the opposite direction. So if you happen to come into something that is junior level because that's what you wanted, but the manager, he or she already knows from the onset that you're an expert in XYZ, it's not uncommon for that person to then find, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Consultant, I know you're here doing this, but I also know from our conversation that you're an expert in this space, and we're having just a hell of a problem with this, and thought maybe you'd have a couple of minutes where you could take a look at this and see if you could lend us a hand. So you're in there doing what you wanted to do, which is your side hustle, but then you also get to lend some expertise perhaps in the area where you are already an expert. And I think perhaps just enriching that opportunity as a whole and making it more rewarding for not just the client, but for yourself. So
Yeah.
I would just shoot from the hip. I would just say, hey, I got 25 years here. I'm not a junior level person in what I am an expert in, but I'm absolutely just getting started in coding. I've always been curious about coding. I've always wanted to learn more about it. I've spent the last XYZ number of months or years immersing myself in it. I've been doing some coding and programming at home, and I think I'm ready to start contributing to an organization in that space. And since I have 20 hours a week where I'm not needed doing anywhere else, I think I could really bring some value because I'm very eager and excited about this technology, and I'd love to be a contributor. I think that's going to be more impactful to somebody who's hiring than to try and hide the fact that you're actually a senior level person in the space, because I'm pretty sure 2 minutes after talking to you, Gary, it's going to be impossible to hide that you're not an expert in that space to some extent.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Would you agree?
Oh, yeah. I agree with you. My thinking was to get past the gatekeeper. Sometimes the recruiters are, I don't know what it is. It's the names that shall not be named recruiting companies out there. Let me talk to my accounts manager, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I got to meet with you to make sure. And they were like a bartender before in college or something. And why are you qualified to be an IT recruiter again? Oh, because I have a degree in whatever. How is that?
Communications.
Yeah.
Right. HR.
They have no idea about IT, and they're talking to the IT operations manager, he or she, and they're not conveying what I'm talking about. And it's but
the funny thing is that's true even when you're applying for senior level positions in which you are immediately qualified for, right?
Yeah.
Just like the previous conversation, I mean, you're going to know real quick the caliber of person you're dealing with right away. And so, kind of like a comment I made earlier about metering expectations, if you're, since as an expert in the space yourself, you're going to acknowledge and probably identify very quickly the caliber of individual that you're dealing with, whether it's for a senior level job or an entry level job, regardless. And so that might just be another, as discussed before, that really might just be a great example of a call that in a relationship that you don't invest a whole lot of time into, because they're probably not going to be a good resource. I would also say leverage relationships with existing people that you already have, whether it's clients you've supported in the past, whether it's peers that you have in the industry who maybe already work in the space at which you're looking to break into, because especially for the companies they're already working at, that's oftentimes an excellent opportunity to break into that space on a side hustle level, is if you already know someone who works in that space, because generally at the junior to mid, that junior level, most companies kind of have a revolving door at that level. They don't have excellent retention when they're talking about bringing people in who are super green, whereas somebody like yourself who has discipline, who understands the business, who understands that technology space, is much more capable and qualified of dealing with the things that a person who's brand new into that space is going to encounter. And you're actually better equipped to deal with that position, especially mentally and emotionally, being not new to the industry, than say somebody who's fresh out of college and this is perhaps their first job, who's and their first foray into the real world, which can be obviously kind of jarring and shocking for some people sometimes. So you already know how to navigate that arena. So you already have a leg up on somebody coming out of college. And if I was a hiring manager, I'd probably be more inclined, especially for a temporary position, I'd be more inclined to hire somebody like you than somebody out like an intern level that's just breaking in.
I wonder if you could just talk to all those people I talk to sometimes from outside. just just be like my catalyst or whatever. Just talk on my behalf. Like, this guy, knows X, Y, Z. He doesn't know everything, but he knows this and that and the other. Like, what do you call it? Like a handler or like a
I'll be like a broker.
Broker. There you go. Like a broker, IT recruit or an IT broker, basically. Yeah.
Hey, might have just created a new market.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And I think that comes back to knowing yourself and being confident in how you want to market yourself as a person at really at any stage or to anyone. And so just as speaking about what you don't know as confidently as you speak about what you do. And you know as well as I do, and I'm sure the majority of the folks listening would agree that not knowing an answer but knowing how to find an answer is oftentimes just as valuable as already knowing how to do something. So being able to say, Mr. and Ms. Manager, to be completely transparent with you, I don't know the answer to what you're asking me, but I can confidently say that I know how to find the answer, and I know how to do it in a way that's quick, that gets me back on task, right? That level of problem solving, that's not common in interviews. And believe me, for as many as you've been on, I've conducted more, right? Yeah. So that's not a common trait of people saying, I don't know, but I know how to find it. And I've put a lot of people to work into positions that they might not have been totally qualified for, simply because they were able to convey that they know how to get the answer and how to collaborate and work with people to solve that problem that they don't know how to solve themselves just yet. So, that's, that would really be the crux there, is just being able to say, hey, I don't know, but I know how. I know how to find out how to know.
So I'll tell you, this is not off topic, but this is kind of on topic. But there was interview, 6-7 months ago, something like that, and it was with one of these 3-letter. Let's see, it was like a Lockheed Martin type of company.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. Anyway, so
government contractor.
Yeah, government contract. Yeah. So I go in the interview, and they're all in suit and ties, and I had a shirt on, a nice shirt. Did I have a tie? I think I might wear. No, I didn't have a tie, but everybody else is wearing a tie, kind of like buttoned up or whatever. Almost like the IBM type, right? That's kind of
sure.
Thing. So they asked me some questions, and it wasn't really a lot of. They asked me some technical stuff, but the questions that I asked them was more about the people. I cared more about the people in the working there, because I guess it's just because like I've worked so many companies. I want to just work at a place where I don't have to. On a Friday afternoon, I don't have to think about that other coworker doing their job. I know they got it. If I don't have to get called on a Friday, basically, to do their job because they don't know how, basically.
Right.
So I didn't say that, but that's kind of how I was getting at. Like, what I was asking about in the interview was like, tell me about. I was trying to convey to them when I work at a place that I try to find out the people that are kind of shy and bring them up, basically. Like there's something their leadership is not doing for them that person is not contributing to the rest of the team, which translates later on into it's Friday, and they've never probably experienced a lot of, like, for instance, I can remember one time, this is me going off topic a little bit, but when the system was down, it was like I did an upgrade or whatever on a NetApp, and it was Friday. And okay, I just need to figure it out, right? Okay, I called NetApp, right, of course, and I got it up like 8 hours later. But I know there's other folks that I've worked with, and I know there's people out there who are like kind of like a little overwhelmed, or who can be overwhelmed, right? And
Right.
that's the whole goal, I guess, for me when I work at a place, is to bring them up. Not that I'm any higher or whatever, but more like, let's see what skill you have, and I can learn from you and you can learn from me. That way, when it's on a Friday and the system needs to be back online because Monday you don't want to come in and get a big problem, you know how to troubleshoot, you know who to call and expedite and say, well, the server's down, and it's been 5 minutes, I can't figure it out, I'm calling the vendor. That's how and I've been in this situation before where I'll rack my brain trying to figure it out. That never works. That's never a solution. The better solution is to just call the vendor after like 5 or 10 minutes can't work. Let me call the vendor. And I got a lot of flack actually last couple jobs ago where I'd call the vendor all the time. And it was like literally on a week I would call the vendor like 2 different vendors. I would call them like an hour every week at the minimum, because there's always these little things that I don't know about. And I would get some kind of like flack a little bit from my coworkers. Like I told them, I said, like, this is $1 billion company. I don't know everything. Who can know everything? That's not no, I'm here to facilitate and to make it work, and to learn as well. But why rack my brain? Let's hand it off to somebody who knows more about it, and that way I can learn and through them teaching me basically. But what I was going after, right? My initial point was because of it'd be nice to know if there's a magic pill, basically, where what people are thinking on the other side. And I say this to say this: the money factor. A lot of companies, maybe they think this, but they always think it's like money. But the more I figure out IT, the more I understand it. It's less about money. Money is important, but it's more about like, I want to follow a good leader. I don't want to follow money. I want to follow a good leader. I can take less money here for something else, but I don't want to have a bad leader who's like, micromanaging. Like that never works out. I've experienced that already. I wonder if there's something you can talk about that. I know you probably haven't, a recruiter, but maybe there's some things that you could probably go over, like the, how to, in your view or a company's view, basically, or what they are if there's bad feedback from a company about past people working there or past candidates, are you allowed to tell me, oh, that's probably bad? They didn't hire that because there's a bad leadership. Can you talk about stuff like that, or is that like
Yeah.
you have like NDA or something?
No. Oh, well, no, that's fine. So that's a great. God, there's a lot there. That's a great question. So yeah, I could definitely talk about that, and that's a hot button for me because, so fun fact, 3 out of the last 4 years of my career as a recruiter, I actually served as the manager of my division. So not only was I still maintaining my own book of business and maintaining my own relationships and clientele and continuing to put people to work, but I was also mentoring and training and leading a group of people that I had hired underneath me to do the same thing at the same time. So I could speak to, obviously from a producer standpoint as well as from a management standpoint. And, in my management career, I received a lot of, really excellent feedback that I think helped make me a better leader over time. And I want to emphasize something that I've just said. You may have noticed that I never referred to myself, other than title, I never referred to myself as managing people or managing or as a manager. And there's a very important distinction to be made there. And it goes back to your point, which is you said, I want to follow a good leader, right? I want to follow a good leader. I don't want to follow the money. I want to work. I want to work for a good leader. And I think first and foremost, it's important to define the distinction there, because people might think, well, that's just semantics. A leader, manager, whatever, right? They're the person you report to. Sure, if you want to get super vanilla about it, yeah, they're the person you report to. But a manager is great at telling people what to do. A leader is great at showing people and setting the example of what to do. A leader is somebody that people want to follow. A manager is someone that people work for. And I think that's an important distinction to be made. So with that understanding in mind, as a recruiter, and this goes back to a previous podcast also, I always took it upon myself when talking with contractors to understand what it was they did and did not like about previous positions they had worked. And micromanagement was oftentimes a common trend, and I think you're going to find that anywhere where there's a management structure, that there's going to be someone complaining that they feel micromanaged. Whether micromanagement is existing at that particular time or not is purely subjective. But and the reasons is that it was important for me to know those answers was because, again, speaking back to a previous podcast, I took it very seriously to try and match somebody to a position that matched as many factors as they could of the things that they wanted, as well as trying to avoid things that I knew from past jobs were not good fits, or were things that they were actively looking to not find, a scenario that they were actively looking to not find themselves in again. So let's say, for example, a consultant said to me, the last, what I didn't like about my last project was it was a very stressful environment. It was stressful from the perspective of the fact that it kind of seemed sometimes like the left hand didn't know what the right hand was doing. Management, there wasn't really great communication from management down the line. Or, there was too many managers, too many hands in the cookie jar, if you will. And, I had to go to this person for this and this person for that. And just the delegation was bad. And, honestly, I didn't work well in that environment. And that's one of the reasons why when the contract didn't renew, I was really happy not to stick around. Awesome. Great. So if I know in advance, as a recruiter, I always took it upon myself also, because the role that I had at the organization where I was the last 9 years, I held a bit of a hybrid role in the sense that not only did I work with the talent such as yourself, but I also worked and spoke and interacted directly with the hiring manager who would ultimately become that person's managing, or that their manager, their director, etc. So I had a relationship with both the client and with the consultants. And so I wanted to learn everything I could about that person, that team's, or that environment of that team. How many people, what was the dynamic? Was it team focused? Was it more individualistic? What's the management structure? What's the reporting structure as far as expectations? Because the better I could understand that environment, then the better I could inform you. I could be on the phone with you and you could say similar feedback to what I mentioned earlier. And I could say, hey, Gary, I don't know if this particular position is really going to be a great fit for you, because I remembered that you had mentioned to me, that the communication seemed a little bit spotty and that the environment was a bit chaotic. And I said, this environment is very similar to that. It's heavily regulated, so it's very chaotic. It's very fast moving. Requirements and commands and tasks that you're being assigned can change, within the hour or while you're in the middle of something. And then I can give you that information and say, and you can make a decision. Well, okay, yeah, that's, but you know what, I'm still interested. Let's talk more about it. Or you might say, hey, you know what? Yeah, thanks for letting me know. That probably would have been a bad fit. And even if the location was great and the money was great, I mean, if you told me that that's an environment you don't thrive in, then I was working to try to not put you in that environment again. And of course, just like a lot of lessons learned, that was something that I learned the hard way by doing it the wrong way, and having contractors quit or get fired because I didn't take the time to ask those questions. I didn't know those things. either about the client or about the consultant. And as a result, I ended up walking them out of the frying pan into the fire. And so, like most policies, they're learned from past mistakes. And that was no different for me. So I always want to disclose that kind of information. Like, and I'll tell you what, I had absolutely no qualms whatsoever of saying, you know what, I don't know that this manager is the right person for you to work for. Because usually I wouldn't disclose the customer. So really, I wasn't harming reputation of anybody, but I would have had no problem to you, or to any consultant, that I was working with to say, you know what, this manager was recently promoted into this position from a completely different role within the company in a completely different skill set. And based on what I know about you, Gary, I don't think this would be a good personality fit for you. And I would elaborate if you had asked me to, but no, there was no, non-disclosure. There was nothing that prevented me. And I'll tell you what, if there was, I didn't care, because at the end of the day, like I said before, I wanted you to start the job. I wanted you to finish the job, and I wanted you to want to continue working with me because I was putting you on successful projects that helped you further your career or helped you provide for your family. And so the more information I could give you, the more informed I could make you, the better my odds were of being able to get that desired goal. And even if that meant not taking the job or not even doing the interview, then to me, that's a successful outcome.
Oh, Gary, yeah, that was great. So I think it's let's wrap it up. How can people reach you? How can they get in contact with you if they have any questions about your knowledge and the services you have?
Absolutely. So the best way to reach me right now is actually through email. And so that's going to be Gary, Gary .Rada, RAD Delta A. So Gary.Rada at N as in Nancy, M as in Michael, NM.com.
Awesome. So I really appreciate Gary. Thanks a lot for coming on the podcast. Yep.